and welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I know I'm like 1,000 years late, but here we are. Ever since I started writing bookish music and posting it online, the most common comment I get, other than the lovely ones about the work or the series the song is about, is for songs based on the Grishaverse. Other than requests for an Alina and Lorcan song or a Dorian and Manon song, which probably are never gonna happen. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I read the first book in the Grisha Trilogy years ago when the series first came out, and then just kind of forgot about it because I got busy with school and there was a gap between then and when the second one was released. Since then, obviously the series got extremely popular, and now Six of Crows is one of the most talked about YA duologies. Now that I'm finished school and have a little bit more time on my hands, I decided now is the time to dive into the Grishaverse for real. Six of Crows has been on my TBR for ages and I really want to read it, but I'm one of those weird people that has to read books in publication order, even though everyone tells me I don't actually need to do that. So I am. Don't judge me. So I knew that I had to finish reading the Grisha Trilogy before I could get to Six of Crows. So that's kind of the backstory of how we ended up here, many years too late. This review will contain spoilers, so if you haven't read this series and you don't want to find out what happens, then you should probably go read it and then come back later. It has taken me 3 years, but I finally finished this series, and now I can move on to Six of Crows, which is really the reason I wanted to be here. The first thing I want to say is, for a series that was so hyped and so beloved by many people whose reading tastes I respect, I just could not vibe with this series. I think overall I would give it a 3 out of 5 stars. Certain books in it I enjoyed more than others, but I just could not connect with the characters or the plot. This isn't going to be a negative review in the sense of I'm not here to shit all over this series. It's just more my thoughts on why personally I didn't really vibe with it, and kind of, yeah, give you some insight as to why. I'm going to first answer the question many of you are wondering, and probably the reason you clicked on this video. Will there be Grishaverse songs? I am anticipating loving Six of Crows, so I'm assuming I will make songs about that when I read it. I have not done that yet, so no spoilers please. But for the Grisha Trilogy itself, the only song that I plan on making is a song for Alina and the Darkling, at least as of this point. I think their dynamic is one of the strongest parts of the series, and I really did not vibe with the rest of it, so I finished largely uninspired on the music front. I did post a snippet of that song to TikTok and Instagram, so if you're interested in getting a little teaser of what I've been working on, definitely go check it out. So all that said, let's jump into my thoughts on this series. If you haven't heard of it or you just want a little bit of a refresher, the basic plot is as follows. This is a Imperial Russia inspired fantasy where Alina Starkov is a cartographer in the military. They have to cross something called the Fold, which is basically a giant stretch of darkness covering the land where a bunch of monsters live. As they're crossing the Fold, Alina's best friend Mal gets injured, and this sparks her to release a flash of light, which turns out to be her magical power. She is what's called a sun summoner, or someone that can bring light when there is none. She is then brought to the palace to train in a magic school with other people like her. Although she is the only sun summoner, there are other kinds of summoners, and this school is led by the mysterious and powerful Darkling, whose powers are the opposite of Alina's. She can make light, he brings darkness. Because of the danger the Fold presents with its monstrous inhabitants, the kingdom is depending on Alina to master her powers and ultimately defeat this darkness and save the nation. However, this handsome and mysterious Darkling is both power hungry and hot diggity, and he seems to have his own mysterious plans for her. Eventually the kingdom is plagued by war because ultimately we discover the Darkling is a villain type who wants to take over everything and who is himself responsible for the creation of the Fold. Alina seeks 3 amplifiers, which are mythological beasts who, if she kills them, they will amplify her power and she will become even more impressive with her light magic. So the series follow her trying to track down these amplifiers and get a hold of them before the Darkling does, to ultimately defeat him and save the nation. The end. Yay! Let's get into it. First of all, I will talk about what I liked because we like some positivity. The number one thing I like about this series is that the world is very fresh. I have never read any other Russian-inspired fantasy before, especially not in YA, so this whole world and magic system, government style, all of it just felt very new and exciting. As I said earlier, the dynamic between Alina and the Darkling is also one of this book's strongest elements. If you like damaged bad boys who may or may not have goodness hidden deep within, you will definitely enjoy that aspect. I think their relationship really feeds into the themes, which are really about the sacrifices necessary for power, the tension between love and power, between greed and security, and the deep human desire to not be alone. Because of who the Darkling is, their relationship really feeds into this, because the Darkling's two motivations are power and to not be alone. Alina is also a lonely person, and she is very seduced by power, even though the goodness of her heart and her own moral compass are very resistant to this concept. So there's a lot of back and forth between them, tension, both of them kind of wanting them to save each other in various ways, but also their relationship is super toxic. So from a ship perspective, I definitely don't ship them. Their relationship is fucked up, but from a literary plot kind of element, I think it is the most interesting aspect of this book. As I kind of touched on, I really do like the themes of this book. I think they come together really beautifully at the end. A refrain throughout this whole story is, what is infinite? The universe and the greed of men. We see this at play in Alina's own journey as she searches for the amplifiers. She convinces herself she needs them to defeat the Darkling and save the kingdom, but ultimately there's a part of her that simply wants power for its own sake. We reach the eventual plot twist in the third book, where we discover the third amplifier is not actually the Firebird as they thought. It is Mal, her best friend slash now lover. This twist plays perfectly into the themes, because for Alina to attain the ultimate level of power, she must kill the person she loves most. There's a tension here between obviously her love for Mal and her need to save the kingdom, but also the complication over her own motivation, where if she kills Mal, is it to save Ravka and defeat the Darkling, or is it ultimately because she is like the Darkling and wants to attain ultimate power for herself? At the end, Mal sacrifices himself, Alina attains his power, but then loses her power when she kills the Darkling. So everything comes full circle. When he is defeated, the Darkling's final words are, "Don't let me be alone," which really presents Alina and the Darkling as mirrors. Both are very lonely souls that are simply seeking a sense of purpose or fullness in their lives, but the Darkling does this by trying to become the most powerful being and enslave any who would disagree with him, whereas Alina ultimately becomes common, non-magical, and lives a boring life with Mal. The concluding sentence really sums this up. They had an ordinary life full of ordinary things, if love can ever be called that. So here we see the author's message is fully summed up. There is a dichotomy or tension between love and power, and you have to give up one or the other, and you cannot have both simultaneously. But when you choose love, love is in and of itself just as extraordinary as anything that power could give you. Let's jump to what I didn't like, which is sadly most of this video. The first thing is the characters. Alina in particular, I found insufferable. I could not care less about her. Honestly, most of this story depends on us wanting her to just be okay and to make it through a war, and I was like, bitch, fucking die already, I don't care. In a story that's so based on the tension between her and the Darkling, will she become a villain, won't she? I found myself just wanting her to become a villain. I was like, this whole world, like, just choose the Darkling, become evil, and devour the nation with your monster offspring. Like, I don't care, just kill everyone. At least that would stop your insufferable whining. In the first book in particular, she is the epitome of the classic YA protagonist, where she's brunette and pale and ugly, but everyone is somehow obsessed with her for no reason. She is brutally insecure to the point where she makes stupid decisions and causes drama and toxicity in her relationships just because she doesn't like herself and doesn't understand why other people like her. Beyond that, just from like a story writing perspective, she has no personal motivations, and so the entire series is basically based on her just getting pulled along for the ride. She mostly operates from a place of wanting to protect the people she loves, but her relationship with Mal is frequently so fraught that that is irrelevant because she doesn't have anything to do to protect him when he's off doing his own thing. Essentially, she just exists in this world while other people make decisions around her, and then eventually she goes along with it. We see this when she goes to the palace to be trained, when she decides to seek the amplifiers, when she sides with Nikolai in the war. None of these things are her idea. They're just basically people telling her what to do. She throws a little hissy fit about it and then eventually comes around. She also doesn't earn anything through hard work. She simply mopes about and then suddenly has an epiphany or a breakthrough in the nick of time to master her abilities or whatever she's doing at the time. Worst of all, in my personal opinion, is that she completely lacks a sense of humor. It is just painful to read about, for me, somebody so mopey and unwilling to laugh at life. I'm going to read to you from page 354 in the second book, Siege and Storm, because this scene just perfectly encapsulates her obnoxious insecurity. Nikolai is about to kiss her. Nikolai is the prince I forgot to mention. Anyways, my heart leapt into a panicked gallop. This is Nikolai, I reminded myself. Pure calculation. I didn't even think I wanted him to kiss me, but my pride was still smarting from Mal's rejection. Hadn't he kissed plenty of girls? I want to kiss you, Nikolai said, but I won't. Not until you're thinking of me instead of trying to forget him. I shoved backward and lurched awkwardly to my feet, feeling flushed and embarrassed. Alina. At least now I know you don't always say the right thing, I muttered. Like what? Literally, she's annoyed at Mal, and then this other guy wants to kiss her, and she's like, I'm gonna do it to get back at him. And then the other guy is like, actually, you know what? I really like you and I want to kiss you, but it's not fair to me because you don't actually want me. You're just about this other guy, so we're not gonna do that now. And then she's annoyed at him. Like, you're using him to get back at your ex, and then you're embarrassed and insecure about the fact that he doesn't want to go along with your manipulative plan? What? Moving on from Alina, Mal, the main love interest, is just as bland and annoying and toxic. Honestly, their love story is a driving force for this whole series, and I have never read two characters with as little chemistry or senses of self as these two. Honestly, they deserve each other just because they're both such limp noodles. Like Alina, Mal has no personality except for petty and douchey. Before Alina discovers her powers, he doesn't notice her at all. We find out later he did, sort of, but he spends his time with other women, not making a move on Alina and basically treating her like a little sister or best friend. Then, after she gets her powers, he spends the entire series being insecure about the fact that she is now better than him and resenting her for having her own sense of purpose and identity outside of him. On page 329, again from Siege and Storm, we have an example of one of his worst traits, which I think is actually just blatantly toxic and awful. The two are about to kiss. Come back to me, he said softly. He drew me to him, but as his lips met mine, something flickered in the corner of my eye. The Darkling was standing behind Mal. I stiffened. Mal pulled back. What? He said. Nothing. I trailed off. I didn't know what to say. The Darkling was still there. Tell him you see me when he takes you in his arms, he said. I squeezed my eyes shut. They carry on. Mal gets petty, and she tries to explain. She says, Mal, the Darkling, and he interrupts, I don't want to hear about the Darkling anymore, or Ravka, or the amplifiers, or any of it. I'm done. Blah, 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 blah. He's being petty. You don't understand, I said. You flinched. Tell me you didn't. It wasn't because of you. Mal laughed harshly. I know you haven't had much experience, but I've kissed enough girls to know what it means. Don't worry, it won't happen again. Let me just explain to you the context of this and why he's such a douche. Alina had a very brief relationship with the Darkling in the first book before she knew he was an evil mastermind that wanted to enslave her and then conquer the world. Put yourself in Alina's shoes. You have just discovered that somebody that you kissed one time only kissed you so that they could enslave you and then eventually use your powers to conquer the world. The Darkling's kisses were consensual, but I cannot imagine her feeling any way except for abused and violated after finding out that information. Now she's trying to move on happily with somebody that loves and cherishes her, and they're sharing an intimate moment when the man who abused her and tried to enslave her suddenly appears behind to torment her. She freaks out and has a very normal PTSD-style reaction and no longer feels up to kissing this current guy because all she can think about is this other man who wanted to abuse her. When she tries to explain this to her new boo, instead of listening because he knows that the Darkling is an evil who wanted to conquer the world through his girlfriend, he completely dismisses her because he's so insecure about the fact that she ever kissed another man that he stomps away in a sulky rush, instead throwing the whole thing back in Alina's face and blaming her for the situation. He doesn't have a bone of sympathy for her and all that she struggled through because he's too busy being insecure about the fact that she ever had a relationship with somebody that wasn't him. There is no character in this entire series that I would like to slap more. Let's jump ahead to page 365 to hear about how much he can't handle the fact that she has any sort of power that makes her more important than him. Alina says, let's leave. Let's run away tonight and forget we ever saw this place. He let out a bitter bark of laughter. Do you know how much I want that? To be with you without rank or walls or anything between us? To just be common again together? He shook his head. But you won't do it, Alina. I will, I said, tears spilling over my cheeks. Don't kid yourself. You'll just find a way back. I don't know how to fix this, I said desperately. You can't fix it, he shouted. This is the way it is. Did it ever occur to you that maybe you were meant to be a queen and I'm not meant to be anything at all? That isn't true. He stalked towards me, the boughs of the trees making strange shifting shadows across his face in the twilight. I'm not a soldier anymore, he said. I'm not a prince, and I sure as hell am not a saint. So what am I, Alina? They continue having this conversation, and he then says, It's never easy with us, is it? And she says, No, Mal, it isn't. It's never going to be sweet or comfortable with me. I can't just leave the little palace. I can't run away or pretend this isn't who I am, because if I do, more people will die. I can't ever just be Alina again. That girl is gone. I want her back, he said. He is the least supportive love interest I have ever read. Honestly, I don't understand why they love each other, why they want to be together, because their whole relationship is built on the idea that both of them resent the other person for having other relationships or finding anyone else attractive. I kind of hate the fact that Alina becomes common in the end because it just justifies Mal's behavior and his deep desire to want her to be as meaningless as him in the world. He feels insecure about his role and purpose, and so he can't handle the fact that she has one. She makes the point that if she leaves to run away with him as he wants, people are going to die because the entire kingdom is depending on her and her abilities, and his response is to just be sulky and say, I don't like it. I miss the old you when you had no abilities and you only cared about me. Just literally so selfish and petty and insecure, and I cannot deal with it. Nikolai says to them at one point, For two people with a love eternal, you're both awfully insecure, and I just feel like it could not be put better. Thank you, Nikolai, for making this book self-aware. On the note of Nikolai, Nikolai is everyone's favorite character. He is funny, charming, a kind of dashing rogue who lives for adventure and likes to tease people. I definitely enjoyed reading him. He made the book more exciting, and I was vibing a lot with him until his non-consensual kiss with Alina. Obviously, he didn't mean it in any sort of awful way and would not have taken it any farther than that, but I'm just quite tired of authors writing these kind of scenes into books and not calling it out for what it is. She didn't want him to kiss her, she wasn't prepared for it, and she didn't like it after it happened. I also just think he had no reason to like Alina, and even though he was never in love with her, he certainly admires her and thinks she's pretty and quickly develops a friendship and trust with her that really didn't make sense to me in light of how she behaved through the rest of the story. I've heard many people express that they wished Alina and Nikolai would have ended up together because Mal is bland, but honestly, Alina is just as bland, and so Nikolai deserved way better. And so I just cannot see somebody as charming as Nikolai actually falling for someone like Alina, unless he was a power-hungry mongrel like the Darkling who just wanted somebody who was easy to manipulate. I don't really believe that's true of Nikolai, so their whole relationship made zero sense. There are a handful of other side characters that exist through the entire series, but honestly for me they were so unremarkable I couldn't even tell them apart. I can't even now remember their names 2 weeks after I finished reading this series, except for maybe Genya, but honestly, all of them were so insignificant to the overall plot that I just didn't give a shit. Even the Apparat, who had the potential to be kind of a secondary villain, just disappeared as soon as they left the underground and played no further role in the plot. On that note, let's talk about the plot. The plot was another thing I found extremely disappointing. It was boring, and through 3 books that were about 400 pages each, so little happened. Like I said, Alina doesn't make any real decisions for herself, which really makes things feel extremely slow, and a large portion of all 3 books is spent on quests to find the various amplifiers. These quests had the potential to be really interesting because I do love a good quest narrative, but very little happened on any of the quests. It was essentially just people wandering around, and most of the drama was built on the relationship dynamics and tension there, but as I said, the characters were unremarkable, so this wasn't enough to really pique my interest. There was a lot of potential for them to fight fun monsters or have obstacles or various puzzles to solve, mysteries, but really it was just them wandering around the wilderness, finding the amplifier, and killing it with ease. They do get attacked a handful of times, but ultimately no one important dies, and they defeat the opponents also with ease. This pattern continued right through the final battle when they ultimately confront the Darkling head on, but like the rest of the series, they defeated him with ease as well. Honestly, it was so anticlimactic that when he died at the end, I was surprised that there were so few pages left in the book because I thought, surely this isn't it. This is some sort of trick and he's gonna pop back up. As I said earlier, I did like the thematic ending, so I was glad I made it to the end of the series because things really did tie together in a very moving way, but ultimately the extreme amount of boredom and dislike I had for the characters through my reading experience meant that I really can't say this is a series I love or will ever be interested in reading again. All that to say, I am really excited to get to Six of Crows, and also I recently purchased Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo because I've heard better things about both of these series by her. Because the writing itself was good and the world building was so fresh in the Grisha Trilogy, I do have high hopes for the rest of Leigh Bardugo's works, and I'm confident that I will enjoy those a lot more. There's construction going on outside and I'm not sure if my camera is gonna pick up the drilling. Yikes! So that is it for this video and my thoughts on the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and definitely leave a comment below with your own thoughts about this series. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.